My brother was a teacher in Bradenton, Florida. His death was a very tragic thing, very public thing, a completely senseless act of violence, and so it attracted national attention. Good Morning America or the Today Show or something, they wanted to do stories on that. And so I helped handle those kind of things. That's what I do. I took care of things. Now, I'd struggled also with sleep for many years. But after that, man, sleep got to be worse and worse. I couldn't sleep. I tried medications. I went to the doctor, and he gave me something for depression. I didn't really realize that it was a real deal. But I was feeling depression and some anxiety and some insomnia. He gave me that, and they worked as long as I had prescriptions for them. But when the prescriptions ran out, I struggled. And I wasn't really handling the spiritual dimension of my struggles. Okay, that's very important that you understand that. Those medications are fine. I'm not going to say anything against those kind of things. Whatever your doctor and you work out, great. But understand that there's a spiritual dimension to our struggles that you have to attend to. And I really didn't. And when those prescriptions ran out, I felt like something was trying to crawl its way out of my chest. That's how bad it was for me. At this point, when I was probably at my weakest, a friend suggested I have a glass of wine. And I was in a church where that was not a big issue. Didn't make a big deal out of it, but I tried wine. And I'm telling you, again, transparency, honesty, there's the first time I ever drank alcohol and felt the effect of it. And I can remember standing in my kitchen and telling Leslie, my wife, I feel like the weight of the world just fell off my shoulders. And it worked. It really did. It took away the anxiety. It made me kind of drowsy. And it worked until it didn't. And that's because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know
welcome to Westside Emmanuel Baptist Church, the church that loves God and loves people. We're in the heart of Bogalusa with Bogalusa on our heart. We look forward to you joining us in person sometime soon as we worship the Lord together.
That's when death was arrested and my life began. Sing it out. Holy grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you.
give it over to you. Your love is like an arrow, straight and true. Now this rebel heart belongs to you. So take my life and let it be yours. So take my life and let it be yours. So take my life and let it be yours. Take my life and let it be yours. I give it over to you. I give it over to you. Your love is like an arrow, straight and true. Now this rebel heart belongs to you.
Peace and grace. And this morning we also, as you can see on our little logo, that as we go through the book of John, our word for this series is believe, that we are believing the Lord. And so I don't know what you have to trust Him on, but I know for many folks, one of the things that they have to believe on the Lord is healing, emotionally and physically, spiritually, over those things that sometimes cause us to not have freedom, cause us to suffer through times of addiction and times of habits and hang-ups and hurts. And so this morning I am privileged to introduce to you a man that comes highly recommended by one whose opinion I trust. Sometimes I don't like her opinion, but I always trust it. And so Miss Lisa, a while back, had told me about that we need to have this brother in Christ come and share from the Word of the Lord. I want to encourage you, if you have some specific issues or questions, maybe that you've gone through, maybe as a family member or as a friend of folks that you're trying to help go through those things. Tonight at 6 o'clock, Brother Ellis will actually be with us. I know there's a ball game. You'll by 6 o'clock, you'll already know who's won or lost, and we'll have ESPN and everything else. And so we'll have that for you. So Lisa made sure, you do know who's playing tonight, don't you? And so she wanted to make sure that I knew that. So I am aware of that. But this morning, Dr. Ellis comes. You'll see a little bit of his bio on the front of the bulletin, but you can also read about that later on their website. But this morning, would you make him welcome? Let him know that you're praying for him. Amen. We're just thankful to have you, brother.
That song, is that your daughter, Sylvia, just sang that? I tell you, I listened to that on the way up from Baton. I live in Baton Rouge. So I was driving up today, and I listened to some worship songs and a little sports radio and that kind of thing. But I listened to Rebel Heart. That's by a singer named Lauren Daigle, I believe. Is that right? Daigle? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Up here in the north, Daigle. She lives in Lafayette, Louisiana, and somebody sent me that song a while back. And man, what the powerful lyrics. And is it Sylvia? She has that same quality of voice. That same kind of spirity, smoky kind of tone there. It's really, that's going to be fun to watch that kind of voice develop. So that's a beautiful voice. But then, yeah. Is that right? That's right. That's right. But anyway, thank you for that beautiful song. And, one thing that occurred to me about the Rebel Heart, and I'm just visiting with y'all right now. You don't mind that, do you? This is not part of the sermon. There's no extra charge for this at all, Marcus. It's just kind of free form. God loves that rebel heart in you. Okay? And you've got to remember that. We've all got a little rebel heart in us. And some of us have a lot of rebel heart in us. It's not like God's saying, man, until you get rid of that heart, I'm not going to draw near to you. That's not the case. If that were the case, He'd never draw close to any of us. But God loves the rebel heart in you. And what He does with that rebel heart, He just loves it out of you. He just draws you close. And when you finally put down your fists and open your hands, that's when the miracle can take place. And about my friend Lisa, I got here this morning, and my wife Leslie texted me when I'm in town in Baton Rouge. There's a church we go to, and Doug and Rita, I don't know their last names, but they used to, okay, well, they were members of this church, and they told Leslie about Lisa's brother, Debbie's husband. And I mean, I just had walked in and found out about that. So I'm just so sorry, Lisa, and Debbie, I'm so sorry. But I tell you what, he's in no more pain. You know, we're the ones hurting, which is understandable, and that's the way it should be. Jesus wept. And so he understands our grief, and so that's entirely natural. But yeah, you know, when we get down to it, he's okay. And we're still here. So I know this church will love you through all that. And I'm so pleased to be here today, to be in Bogalusa. My first time in Bogalusa. I do travel around quite a bit and speak lots of different places, but first time I've ever been in Bogalusa. So thank you so much, Marcus, for your invitation. And what a great spirit in this church, man. There's good energy here. The spirit is energy. The spirit, the word spirit, which you'll find in the Gospel of John sprinkled throughout. You find more about the spirit in the Gospel of John than in any other. And the spirit, where the spirit is, there's life, and there's energy, and there's just some good things going on. And so I sense that in the church, and it's good to be here, good to worship with you. It really, really is. So thank you for inviting me. And on an unusual topic, I mean, this is something you don't hear every Sunday morning, is it? You get somebody to come up and stand before you and say, here's my struggle, here's what I struggled with, and here's how God saved me from it. But we're going to just talk this morning. And I do have a sermon, and I think this is providential. My sermon is from the Gospel of John, chapter 21. If you want to go ahead and turn to that. This verse up here is the last verse in chapter 20. I'll mention that a little later. But you're going to be going through the Gospel of John in this new sermon series, and I'm telling you, it is just full of wonderful, wonderful insights about Jesus. And in fact, Marcus, when I'm talking to people, I work with people who are new in recovery or just trying to get into recovery, and they don't know anything about God, or there are a lot of times they're just angry at God. They think God has let them down, or they don't like the church, or they don't like Baptist preachers, something like that. I mean, that's very common. I'm serious. And so I'm working with them. They say, what did you do? I said, well, I was a Baptist preacher. You know, they go, that's something to get caught. But I say, look, do this. Because they're still interested in the Bible. And I said, look, read the Gospel of John. But read it as if you've never read it before. As if you've never heard of God or Jesus or the Bible or anything. But read it as if somebody who cares about you deeply wrote it directly to you. And I'm telling you, if you'll do that, just read it with a fresh set of eyes. One more story before I get to the sermon. My doctorate's in Greek New Testament. I mentioned this later in the sermon. I've translated the New Testament many times, and most parts of it many, many times, written on all this kind of stuff. The man who taught my seminar, my doctoral level seminar on the Gospel of John, was Ed Glaze down at New Orleans Seminary. He passed away a number of years ago. But he'd said this in that seminar, and we thought Dr. Glaze was so old at that time that he literally knew the original Greek personally. That's how old we thought. And now I look back on that time, and Dr. Glaze at that time was the same age I am now, which is kind of unusual. But anyway, he used to say this. He said, I've translated the Gospel of John, I've worked with it, and I've studied it for 40 years, he said, which is the amount of time I've studied it now. He said, whenever I go back to it and read it, there's always something new. And that's the power, that's the energy of the Spirit. Okay, so read that Gospel of John, and blessings on you as you go through this study and this sermon series. Mine's in the Gospel of John today, so I thank God for leading me in that direction. Let's just have a word of prayer real quick before we begin. Father, I thank you for this time to be with this wonderful church. I thank you for the worship that we've already experienced, your presence. And Lord, we don't invite your presence here, we just acknowledge your presence. You're already here. So what we want to do is open our hearts and minds to your Spirit in a new and fresh way, and that in the reading of your word and in the proclamation of your word, as we've already had through music and now in the spoken word, we listen for your voice. And we offer up to you our rebel hearts and ask that you grace them in special ways this morning. In the name of Christ I pray. Amen. One of the great New Testament words that talk about salvation is the word redemption. And redemption conjures up this image that something was captive, something was chained up, and something came along and said, you are free. And when the writers of the New Testament were inspired to write about salvation, it's kind of natural they came across this word and said, that's what it's like to become a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ, because we were all in darkness, we were in bondage to sin. There was something that had a hold of us, but we were freed by the miraculous sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the grace of Christ, and that has freed us. And that is the puzzling and even scandalous nature of God's grace. Redemption is couched in grace. It's never exhausted. Now, to be honest with you, as I grew up as a young Christian and in my early adult experience with Christianity, I never thought a great deal about redemption. And I hope you understand this, and I bet a lot of you can relate to it. I was 9 years old when I became a Christian, all right? Now, I knew that I was a sinner. I just hadn't had a lot of experience with that. You understand what I mean? I was not a member of a tricycle gang at 6 or anything like that. I was a typical 8-year-old fella, and I was getting in my mischief, that kind of thing, for sure. And I learned in church about sin, and I knew I'm a sinner. I got a problem. But as far as that sense of, man, I am just overwhelmed by my sense of lostness, and the darkness has enveloped me, and now Christ has burst in, I can't say that I had that. Later, I would come to cherish that word, redemption. I would realize with an incredible personal force that redemption is not just reserved for that moment you first say yes to God. It is a word that applies with a special vigor anytime we find ourselves overwhelmed by the darkness and we feel like there's no hope. And then we find, as in the prologue of the Gospel of John, that the light has come and it has overcome darkness, and no darkness can overcome that light. That's redemption. So wherever you are today, whatever your shadows, whatever your darkness, there's light for you, and it will free you. And I learned that. God's grace is limitless. There is no darkness that can extinguish it. There's no brokenness that's beyond His healing touch. No chain can resist its freeing power. No death can reject its resurrection. No one is beyond God's reach. No one. No one. And as long as we draw breath, and again, if we just unclench our fists, which most of us do, that we're fighting with life, we're fighting with each other, we're fighting with God. And if you'll just relax and take life as it comes, life as it is, you'll find that God has woven His presence in every single event. He's there. And then the grace can come in. And you'll be free, like we sang earlier. Now, the most powerful stories in the Bible, to me, are the ones that make clear this profound truth. And the story of Peter at the end of the Gospel of John is a great, great example. Now, the text I'm about to read is from John chapter 21. I'm going to read verses 1 through 9. And it describes another appearance of the risen Christ. And this time the focus, even though He's appearing to a lot of the disciples, the focus without question in the entire chapter 21, is on Peter. And we're going to remember some things that he did and why I think Jesus went to a special trouble, if you will, to come and to take care of some business, some darkness that was in Peter's heart. So let me read for you chapter 21, verses 1 through 9. Now, after these things, Jesus appeared again to the disciples on the Sea of Tiberias, or beside the Sea of Tiberias, and He appeared in this way. There was Simon Peter and Thomas, the one called Didymus, and Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of the disciples. And Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we'll go with you. And so they went, they got into a boat, they fished all night and caught nothing. Now early the next day, Jesus was standing on the shore, but they didn't know that it was Jesus. And He said to them, children, have you caught anything? And they said, no. And He said to them, throw your net upon the right side of the boat, and you're going to find some fish. So they threw the nets in that way, and they couldn't bring in the nets for the great haul of fish. And the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And Simon Peter, hearing that it was the Lord, bound up an outer garment upon him, for he was stripped for fishing. And he jumped into the sea. And the other disciples came in the boat. Now, they were not far from the shore, but about 100 yards. And they were dragging with them the great net of fish. And as they came upon the shore, they saw a charcoal fire with fish laid upon it and bread. And we'll stop there. Chapter 20 ends with a high note. That's not up there right now. But it ends with a high note. It is your theme verse for this series of sermons. These things were written, there it is back in the back. These things are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing in him you might have life in his name. That's so full of so many themes that we find throughout the Gospel of John. But in a sense, John came to the end of the Gospel, and he said, this is why I wrote it. I wrote this so that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and that believing in him you might have life in his name. Then something else happened. The Spirit inspired John to include another chapter. Because to tell you the truth, that sounds like a good ending, doesn't it? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if we didn't have chapter 21, we wouldn't think, well, what's the rest of the story here? It's a good ending. But there was some unfinished business. And so the Spirit inspired John to go back and write what we call the 21st chapter. So we open chapter 21, and the disciples are doing what? They're going out and they're changing the world. They're preaching the gospel. Nope. They're fishing. Peter, always the leader, as chapter 21 opens, he said, I'm going fishing. And so they did. Now, why? Now, the focus of this story, the focus of the entire chapter, really is certainly Peter. No question about that in my mind. Now, what do we know about him that might have led him to go fishing instead of preaching the gospel? What took the wind out of his sails? What held him back? Now, we don't have to search long for the answer, and you probably already have guessed. For on the night that Jesus was arrested and tried, Peter vehemently denied even knowing him. Wouldn't admit to it. Don't know him. Never heard of him. Peter had said, I will die with you. And yet he ran. Peter said, yet though even everyone else abandoned you, I will never do that. But he did. Peter took up a sword to defend Jesus. But when he was challenged by some servants, he wouldn't stand his ground at all. What a dreadful fall. The expectations were so high. And he'd set him that high. But he fell so very far. And I think that when it was time for him to go out on his own and to embrace this mission, he was so overwhelmed by shame that he said, I'm going fishing. Can't do it. Going fishing. Now, I know something as I stand before you this morning about high expectations and bitter falls. I know the burden that it creates. I know how to deal with it in a dangerous and destructive way. But I also know what it's like to recover. All right? Now, I am an alcoholic. I think the children have left, so you don't have to explain all that to them in case it creates some questions. They wonder what else is going on here. But we're going to be honest today. I am an alcoholic. I am in recovery from alcoholism. I nearly lost my life. A little over 5 years ago, I was on the way out. I truly was. But grace wrote a different end to my story, and it's still being written. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I was raised Southern Baptist, and I am very grateful for what this vigorous denomination gave me early in life. I mean, I'm a flannel board Jesus follower, boy. I tell you. Some of you don't even know what I'm talking about. That was high tech back in the 60s, man. Those flannel boards. We learned about the stories of the Bible on those flannel boards. And then later in life, I went to New Orleans Seminary, got a master's degree in Bible and biblical studies, a doctorate in Greek. And I loved church. I really did. I loved church. I loved Sunday mornings. We went Sunday morning, Sunday night. We went Sunday afternoon to a training union. And we came back on Wednesday nights as well. I did go through that rebellious period when I was a teenager, I'll be honest with you. Where I didn't want to go to church. Making me go to church. People talk about, I get this a lot with these guys in early recovery markets. They say, well, I don't like organized religion. And I said, well, most religion can be very disorganized. Just go to any church. You're going to love it in most churches, okay? I guarantee you. No, I don't like organized religion. And I said, well, tell me about your background. You've been to school? Yeah, I went to high school. I graduated high school, went to college, got a degree. I said, well, that sounds like organized education. And they kind of paused, okay? So organized religion works for me, But when I was a teenager, I didn't want to go to church. Didn't want to go to church. And I went through about like a 3-week period. I was really wrestling with my mom and Dad. He wasn't in the middle of all that at the time necessarily, but Mom was, and giving her a hard time. Finally, one Sunday, she said, well, I'm not gonna, I don't want to feel like a warden. I'm not gonna make you go. But then she did this. She cried. And I felt so guilty that I went into the ministry to try to make up. Now, I've been in church for the second Sunday of my life. That's back when we didn't know about germs. Man, we took them to church. I literally was at church 8 days after my birth. I guess just like Jesus, maybe, you know, I was in church. And seriously, though, I loved going to church. I was raised in a faith that was marked by grace. Now, we all get our first theology from our parents. It's important that you realize that. A lot of times I deal with people whose theology is just overwhelmed by a parental hangover, in a sense. You get your first theology from your parents. But I was adopted. I was adopted at birth. I was adopted into a very loving, caring family. Mom and Dad, my brother Kim was 8 years older than me. They made me feel loved, chosen, and cherished. That's a good way to begin your thinking about what your higher authority is and who God might be. And so when I grew old enough to learn about God and Jesus, I felt like I was loved and chosen and cherished. And when, as a 9-year-old boy at Porter Memorial Baptist Church, I walked down, we had a center aisle, I walked down that aisle, and I took Brother Charles Holland's hand, and I said, I want to be baptized, I want to be a Christian. I wasn't running from hell. I was saying yes to a smiling God. Now, that's the way I was raised. And that's the kind of church situation, the kind of faith environment in which I was raised. Now, at age 19, I felt an unmistakable call to become a minister. It was one of the clearest responses to prayer that I'd ever had in my life. I finished a degree in psychology from the University of Kentucky, came to seminary in New Orleans, I've already spoken about that. Studied Greek. In fact, it was this Greek New Testament. I remember in the bookstore, the first week or so of seminary, I was going down the aisle and I saw this Greek New Testament. I've had it recovered since then. But I thought, well, this is amazing. And I remember I looked at that, and it was almost the force of a vision, Marcus. I thought, someday I'm going to read this thing. I just felt that. That's my calling. My calling was to study this kind of stuff and study it really deeply. And I still cherish it. I taught New Testament, I taught Greek in seminary. I began a pastoral ministry that spanned 34 years, 6 churches. For much of that time, I was on television, I was on radio, filled all the various responsibilities of a busy pastor. And over the years, again, I translated the New Testament, most parts of it many, many times. I've written more commentaries on New Testament books than I can recall. I'm not bragging, this is just what I did. This was my calling, this was my job. I wrote articles on biblical topics. I don't know how many, a score or more probably. I am grateful for all the gifts and opportunities that I've given. I have had truly a wonderful life in ministry. I really have. I enjoyed 80% of what it meant to be a pastor. To be honest with you, there's always 20% about anything going, I don't care for that. But I enjoyed being a pastor, and I enjoyed preaching and studying and all that kind of stuff. So where in the world does the alcohol come in? Okay? Now, being raised Southern Baptist meant for us back in those days we didn't drink. And it was not like we had some kind of religious zeal against it. It just wasn't an issue. I was raised in Lexington, Kentucky, and the ethos up there is a little different than down here in the South, especially South Louisiana. The Ellises just didn't drink, all right? And when I say we didn't drink, we did not drink. I don't know that anybody in my family did. It's not like we had an uncle that he fell off the wagon or anything like that. I just wasn't raised around it. When I was a teenager, I was curious, I tasted it, and I thought, this is bad. I had a different peer group, was the church. And so they provided me my sense of identity. So I just was not tempted by that. And the result was that by the time I was 50, the amount of alcohol that I consumed in 50 years would not fill a Dixie cup. I mean, literally, it was just tasting it and going, that does not make sense to me. I don't need it and I don't want it. Now, when I reached 50, some things began to happen in my life. Had some stresses that piled up. I didn't handle them well. There were You have small t trauma and big T trauma. Big T trauma is losing your husband, losing your brother. That's big T trauma. That's tough. And that can have a devastating effect on a life. Small T traumas are just the daily difficulties with jobs and finances and spouses and children, those kind of things, you know, just kind of general stresses of life where life is hard, okay? Well, I had some big T traumas kind of pile up in my life. And the way I responded to that, as I can see back a lot more clearly now, I responded with a combination of fear and disappointment. And also this, I did not reach out to anybody and say, there is an encroaching darkness in my soul. I can feel it. I don't understand it. I've never had anything like it before. What is this? And I could have done that with, you don't really do that with people in your church necessarily as a pastor. You may do it differently, Marcus, but it's a little dicey doing that kind of thing and having that level of transparency. But I could have gone to Marcus as a fellow minister and said, I'm struggling, man. He would have understood. He would have understood every bit of it. The struggles with churches, the frustrations, all that kind of, he would have understood. And if I had done that, a burden shared is cut in half. It always works. And by the way, a joy shared is double. But I've never shared that burden. It was just kind of a situation. I just didn't do that. And so I mishandled that. One of the traumas that I faced when I was about 50 was my brother, Ken, was murdered. And now that's a horrible call to get. And it's one of those things where you're always going to remember exactly where you were when you got the call. And I remember feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. My sister called me and was crying, you know. But I responded in the way that I responded to everything in my life. I took care of things. I was going to be strong. I was going to be there for people who needed me and needed help and needed compassion. So I led the funeral service. I have preached so many family funeral services, you know. I'm the one they came to. My brother was a teacher in Bradenton, Florida. His death was a very tragic thing, very public thing, a completely senseless act of violence, and so it attracted national attention. Good Morning America or the Today Show or something, they wanted to do stories on that. And so I helped handle those kind of things. That's what I do. I took care of things. Now, I'd struggled also with sleep for many years. But after that, man, sleep got to be worse and worse. I couldn't sleep. I tried medications. I went to the doctor, and he gave me something for depression. I didn't really realize that it was a real deal. But I was feeling depression and some anxiety and some insomnia. He gave me that, and they worked as long as I had prescriptions for them. But when the prescriptions ran out, I struggled. And I wasn't really handling the spiritual dimension of my struggles. Okay, that's very important that you understand that. Those medications are fine. I'm not going to say anything against those kind of things. Whatever your doctor and you work out, great. But understand that there's a spiritual dimension for our struggles that you have to attend to. And I really didn't. And when those prescriptions ran out, I felt like something was trying to crawl its way out of my chest. That's how bad it was for me. At this point, when I was probably at my weakest, a friend suggested I have a glass of wine. And I was in a church where that was not a big issue. Didn't make a big deal out of it, but I tried wine. And I'm telling you, again, transparency, honesty. There's the first time I ever drank alcohol and felt the effect of it. And I can remember standing in my kitchen and telling Leslie, my wife, I feel like the weight of the world just fell off my shoulders. And it worked. It really did. It took away the anxiety. It made me kind of drowsy. And it worked until it didn't. And that's the way it always works, guys. Just listen to me. At first, it's fun, and then it's fun with trouble, and then it's just trouble. Or it works, and then it works with trouble, and then it's just trouble. Always the way it is. Always. Don't kid yourself. You are not unique. You are not different. That is the way that it's going if you're relying on that to solve a problem that only God can solve. We all drink and use drugs because we want to change something about the way I feel. There's something we're uncomfortable with inside. For me, I wanted to feel nothing. I wanted oblivion. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to escape from the fears and frustrations, the anger and the despair. I wanted to go away. And alcohol dissolved all of that until it didn't. My relationship with alcohol deepened. my tolerance for it increased. And I'll tell you more about that tonight if you come back. So I drank more and more often. I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I would drink more to go back to sleep, a fitful sleep. 2 bottles of wine a night, not unusual at all, very typical. My depression deepened and worsened, of course, because why? I'm pouring a depressant, which is what alcohol is, onto a depressed brain. I know some people drink and they get kind of wild and crazy. That's not saying that it's not depressing them. It is. Come back tonight, I'll show you what's going on in our brains when we drink. But I got to the point where I was in deep, deep darkness. I was not suicidal actively. I just did not want to wake up. I dreaded the dawn. Cursed the dawn. When the light began to come through weekly in that wind in the morning, if I had slept, and there were so many nights where I'd seen every single hour, maybe 20 minutes of sleep and then waking up and going back 45 minutes of sleep and 15, where I would see 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, parts of 1 o'clock, parts of 2, every single hour of the night. When that sun rose, I would go, I lived through another night. I did not want to live. Leslie was scared to death, of course. She pleaded with me. My typical response was rationalization. I could not have a problem with alcohol because I had half a century of sobriety. You're overreacting. Okay, I'll cut back. Even made a chart one time to control my drinking. I am not making this up. Because I'm a routine guy. I mean, it's always worked for me all my life. I can give me a project. I'll figure out how to do it. I made a chart to control my drinking. Listen, if you're in that situation where you're making a chart to try to control your drinking, just see me after the service. Just stop fooling around. Let's get some things done here, okay? But that is an indication. If you're struggling to control something that has control of you, you've crossed the line into a spiritual dimension that can respond to good, solid medical treatment. And I can help you. One of the most common questions I get when I speak about this, and I speak in churches and civic organizations, I speak in universities now. LSU has asked me to speak. I spoke to them, speaking at LSU Monroe. They want to know about this, but the most common question I get is, how did this happen to you? And I find that amusing. It's as if being a Christian or being a minister somehow should make me immune. Well, Christians get sick, Christians have accidents, Christians die. Faith is no insurance policy against the winds of real life. You can be a Christian and have tremendously terrible things happen to you. I like what Harold Kushner wrote about this one time. He said, expecting life to be fair to you because you're good is like expecting the bull not to charge you because you're a vegetarian. All right? It doesn't care. Life doesn't care. Life is hard. Jesus said that in the Gospel of John 16:33. In this world you will have tribulation. There's nothing in the Gospel that says, follow me, pure and simple, easy going. Not one time. Now, faith does protect us from a lot of bad mistakes. There's no question about that. But don't think that just because you're a Christian, then everything's going to be easy. That's not the case. So I do get that question a lot. We are all capable of wondrous dreams and terrible nightmares. We are victims and we are perpetrators, all of us. How did I become an alcoholic? Little by little and suddenly. That's the way it happened. And when I was in the middle of that darkness, I was only vaguely aware of what I was doing. Addiction takes over a very primal part of our brain, and that part of our brain then convinces us that the drug is necessary for survival. And that's why we do such crazy things when we're in active addiction. You can look at an addict and some things that they're doing, you go, that makes no sense. It doesn't. But the addiction is so strong that it makes sense to them. I know it's puzzling to some of you. I mean, how can this happen? And if you've dealt with this in your families, as many of you have, you have probably said, I'll talk to him, I'll get through to him. I'll talk to her, I'll get through to her. And you do, and they keep going, they keep doing it. And you go, why? Why does this happen? Let me tell you. Here's how you can understand. Don't eat for the next 4 days. Okay? Don't eat for the next 4 days. At the end of that 4th day, try not thinking about food. And that's what it's like for the addict every single day. And I'm telling you, it's a miserable experience, but you don't realize it when you're in the middle of it. But if you want to know what it's like for us, when we're in an active addiction, that's what it's like. Because at the end of that 4 days, that primal part of your brain's going, I don't care what you got to do. Steal, Rob, you need to get food. And even though it doesn't make sense, that's what our brain is telling us about the drugs or the alcohol. So on November 4th, 2013, a member of my church, a dear friend, came to see me. He's a retired doctor, Leon Dement. He pulled a chair around behind my desk, and he said, "Terry, we need to get you well." Now, I didn't know anybody knew what was going on. My staff was aware that something was going on. They thought I was having a nervous breakdown. There was a lot of bad stuff going on in my life at that time. But they did know that I was drinking, or drinking that badly. And I knew what he meant. I felt guilty and I felt ashamed and caught. I was certain that my career was over, my ministry was over. But my darkness was so deep by that time, I just didn't care. There was no fight left to me. Alcohol had drained my spirit, which it always does. It was sacrificing my health and would have taken my life. I had no fight left, only despair. And I agreed to do whatever he told me. He said, "I want you to do what I tell you." And for some reason, I listened. It was just in God's timing. There was something about my willingness. And I said, okay. Let's go back to the scripture for a moment. Let's go back to Peter. That morning when Jesus appeared to them by the Sea of Galilee, Peter jumped out of the boat, he swam ashore, and he ran to where Jesus had started a fire for breakfast. And the text tells us that it was a charcoal fire. The Greek word is anthrakia. We get the English word anthrax, the disease, from this word, from this Greek word, for the black lesions, a charcoal fire, black coal-like substance. So he runs up, and Jesus, of course, could have used driftwood. He could have built a fire in the normal way. There's plenty of driftwood around any body of water, but he went to the extra trouble, I suppose, of bringing charcoal. And it's a word that we only find twice in the New Testament, which is also interesting. Those kind of details have always interested me. So Peter ran up to Jesus. He saw the fire, but he also, I'm sure, smelled the fire, right? And charcoal has a distinct smell, right? Not like wood. It's different. It's charcoal. One of the most powerful memory triggers in your brain is the sense of smell. A certain aroma will fire the synapses and we'll remember where we were and what we were doing when we smelled that aroma. My mother wore White Shoulders perfume. And if I smelled it today, I'd think of Dottie Ellis. That's the memory construct that's up there right now. And remember I said that the word anthrakia was only used twice in the New Testament? The first time is in John chapter 18, verse 19, when Peter was standing around a fire, warming himself in a courtyard, and Jesus was inside being tried. It was a charcoal fire that he stood around when he denied knowing Jesus. You think that's an accident? That Jesus built that fire out of charcoal? So when he crawled up on that shore, he ran to the fire, smelled the charcoal fire. What do you think he thought about? The same thing that caused him to go fishing instead of taking care of the mission. Don't you think that he might have felt, again, that same shame? Don't you think it's that shame that had him fishing in the first place? Don't you think it was that chain that Jesus came to break? And when he asked Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" 3 times, the same number of times that Peter denied him, and 3 times Peter said yes, and 3 times Jesus said, "Peter, get back to work." You know why? Because grace breaks every chain. Every chain. So we went to the doctor the next day. Dr. Leon Dement, and I went to see Dr. Richard Lear. I'd never met him before, but he said, go to treatment. And it's a real myth that the addict has to want to go to treatment. I do intervention. I'll be in San Diego tomorrow to do an intervention. That addict doesn't know what's about to hit him. He will not want to go to treatment. What we do in intervention, though, is we ask this question: what would it take to make him willing to go to treatment? And what helps in that respect is you get a bunch of people in the room, 6 or 10 people that love this guy and are willing to do 3 things. We love you, we're concerned about you, we got a reasonable offer to help you. 90% of them go to treatment. Okay, it's that much. That's not my persuasiveness. It's not that at all. It is the emotional, psychological, and spiritual effect of all those people together making the difference. I was blessed to go to treatment with the help of wonderful counselors, fellow inpatients. I got my spirit back. Alcohol drains your spirit. My life was restored, my health was restored, the direction of my ministry. And my story is simply one example of the way that grace breaks the chain of addiction. And I'm joined probably in this congregation by people who could say that very same thing this morning. I'm not asking you to. But I stand before you today as a man who at one time was so spiritually drained I thought I had no future whatsoever. I was just staggering toward death. My wounds were bleeding and ragged, but no longer, because grace pools in all wounds and it forms beautiful scars. Broadmoor Baptist Church invited me to come back as their pastor after I was treated for alcoholism. That tells you something about that church. Because if they had said, we're glad you're well, but this is complicated, man, I would have understood. It's not incumbent upon me to say, well, I had a disease. Nope, this is a complicated disease. It's a complicated behavior. I would have understood. No, they wanted me to come back. And what happened at that point is people started coming to me with their problems with drugs and alcohol. I pastored large churches over my 30-some-odd years, thousands and thousands of members. Half a dozen people came to me and said I had a problem with drugs and alcohol, or they had a problem with drugs and alcohol. They just don't do it because alcoholism and addiction isolates us. And we don't want to talk to the minister. We don't want to get near God a lot of times. But when I came back, my first words from the pulpit that Sunday morning, my first sermon back, I'm Terry and I'm an alcoholic. Let's talk about this. Church was full. And they weren't surprised by that, but you don't hear that from a pulpit every Sunday morning at a Baptist church. So we did talk about it, but that opened the door for people to start coming to me and say, I'm struggling too. Or they come to me and say this, I got 22 years in recovery. These were deacons, that kind of thing. So it was just wonderful. And people started coming to me then saying, how do I get my husband in treatment? I'll go talk to him. How do I get my wife in treatment? I'll go talk to them. And so that grew. And more than 3 years ago now, about 4 years ago now, I started Chrysalis Interventions. God called me to that. And now I go all over the country and help people get into treatment. Now listen, here's what I sense is going on here. For your pastor to invite somebody he has never met on the word of somebody he knows and trusts, I understand that. But he's never met me, but he says the guy's got a story that my church needs to hear. Here's what I think is happening in this church. Something is moving. Where God wants to say, I want this place to be a beacon of hope for the struggling addicts and alcoholics in this community. Because I guarantee you there are a ton of them. Right? Absolutely. And I believe that the Spirit of God is giving Westside a vision. And together, you're going to help pull back the curtain of shame and silence that keeps so many people in those chains. I hope you start a ministry on recovery in this church. And you give it the resources, the encouragement, and the prayers to help in this present darkness. Because I'm telling you, it's all over the place. Now let's be honest. Too many times the church has struggled in this arena. Maybe it's been a voice of condemnation. Not always, but that's what the addict will hear. They're always super sensitive. And yeah, that sometimes those hard voices sometimes came from old hard-shell Baptists. That's all right. But that judgment cuts across all denominations. It cuts across everybody who doesn't struggle with addiction. Because it's kind of easy for someone who doesn't struggle with it to look down on those of us that do. If you just were a little stronger, you wouldn't struggle. If you had a little stronger character, you wouldn't struggle. You wouldn't do. Don't do this. You wouldn't drink. I thought that for a while. I really did. I wasn't a condemning, harsh kind of guy, but I just thought, I don't understand it. I understand that you don't understand it. But look at it from our perspective. We need acceptance. We need grace to draw us close to God. And this church has a wonderful opportunity to sing the message of grace. And it's time for all churches, but this church in particular, because I think God's calling it, to approach this particular problem in a new and fresh way. I want you to be part of a growing chorus that says addiction is real, but so is grace and recovery. And so I want them to be able to hear in this community of Okaloosa, at Westside Baptist Church, we welcome you here, we understand you here, and we can help you here. You have families in your congregation who are sickened by addicted loved ones, and they're addicted themselves. You've not wanted to tell anyone. You don't know where to turn. You turn here. You turn here. You call this pastor. He knows to call me now, and he's got other people in this community. He knows to call Lisa. Lisa can connect you with some resources, but he'll have my number, and I'll come. I'll help you. Come and see. Come and see me. Come and see your pastor. I'm here all afternoon, by the way. If you need to talk to me, see me afterward. We'll set up a time. You just come in, we'll talk. If you're struggling with addiction or suspect you might be, let us help you. It's fear that is keeping you chained, and your addiction will fight for its life. It wants to keep you in chains. Let my story give you some courage to reach out and ask for help. You may be one of those highly functioning alcoholics. Well, I've never met you, but I know you, all right? And let me tell you, what you're living in right now is an insult to the idea of highly functioning. You have no idea how much your alcoholism or your drug addiction has taken away from your life. Ask your family. I did an intervention in Mississippi several years ago now. Young woman, 27 years old or so, as I recall. She was a chemical engineer, very talented, kept losing jobs, but she didn't have a problem with alcohol. And I was talking to her. She didn't want to go. She said, I don't want to go treatment. And finally, I said, Elizabeth. She finally said this. She said, well, I just drink to go to sleep. And I said, Elizabeth, I have never. I said, and you drink. That's what I said. I said, Elizabeth, you drink at 2 o'clock when you wake back up, don't you? And she looked at me like I had been watching her. And I said, Elizabeth, I've never met you, but I know you. I know you. There's hope for you. And she went to treatment. Now, one other idea real quickly, and we'll wrap it up. How do we even know that this happened? How do we know that Peter denied Jesus? I mean, how do we have insight into that? There were no other disciples around. I doubt anyone turned him in, so to speak. Peter could have told no one and protected his reputation. But he did tell, didn't he? He told people like John what happened in private at that charcoal fire. Hobart Maurer was a 20th century psychologist. He said, we are as sick as our secrets. In other words, if you don't confess to one another, you don't tell someone, if you try to hide your brokenness will continue to break you. Only when you open up, all of you, whatever pain you're feeling, whatever lostness you have, you open up, it's then that God can pour in His grace. Grace cools in our wounds, and it forms a miracle. Because where once the wounds were ragged and bloody, they begin to heal, the pain goes away, and then they scar over, and you, like me, can stand before people and say, here are my scars. They don't hurt anymore, but they are testimonies to the glorious grace of our Savior. I stand before you as one who has been called to help pull back the curtain of shame and silence around addiction and keep so many people suffering. I can do this because I can say, here are my scars, and you say, I understand that grace. At the core of every addiction, there lies a spiritual void, and into that void too often comes the needle, the bottle, or the pill. That's why science, the spiritual nature of addiction, that's why science can help us to understand, but it will never save us. Sound government policy is absolutely vital, but it's not going to deliver us from bondage. Individual initiative, as important as that is, doing more is wonderful, but it will not bring you into the full light of grace and all that light into the shadows of your life. What breaks the chains are stories of people who are in recovery from all kinds of things, who will say, I came to that charcoal fire, I limped into that circle of light, and I found redemption, Jesus Christ, who said to me, I'll break those chains. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for your grace, your powerful, amazing, wonderful grace. I thank you personally again, God, for what you've done in my life. And I thank you so much for Westside Emmanuel Baptist Church having the courage to take this on, and for Marcus saying we need to talk about this and we can do more to help hurting families. God, bless this church, bless this pastor and this staff and this wonderful membership. Help them to find a whole new way to shine the light of grace into the present darkness. And help us all to remember, God, that the light has come and no darkness can overcome it. In the name of Christ I pray. Amen.
Friends, thank you for joining us today at Westside Emmanuel Baptist Church, the church that loves God and loves people. We hope you'll be able to join us this coming Sunday at 10:30 a.m. or 6 o'clock in the evening time. Wednesdays at 6 o'clock for our prayer service, and we also have youth and children's activities as well. We look forward to seeing you. Hope to meet you in person here in Bogalusa with Bogalusa on our heart. We hope to see you soon.